For Mindarie.
Thank you, Madam Acting Speaker. Madam Acting Speaker, I want to put to the sword this ridiculous notion of the Minister that he solved the traffic congestion problems in Perth. I had the inestimable pleasure of travelling to Japan on a trip this year with the Speaker on a speaker's trip, and we were in Tokyo, at the time that the President of the United States travelled to Tokyo as well. And what struck me about moving around Tokyo with the Speaker in our minivan with members was it was easier to move around central Tokyo than it was around the CBD of Perth. It was, I remember for Mandurah saying that as too, he was on that trip, as was the member for Swan Hills. And what struck me is that how come we can move around Tokyo with this ease, but I get more difficulty moving from Parliament down St George's Terrace and doing a lap of the CBD? And of course, my hosts in Tokyo pointed out that post-World War II, when Tokyo was rebuilt, they built a magnificent subway system comprising, it blew me away, 1,500 subway stations. I said, how do you find your way around? He said, I don't. I know where I've got to go to, and there's different coloured trains, but who could know 1,500 subway stations? So there it is. We're talking about the greater metropolitan area of Tokyo. I was told immediate CBD, 10 million people, Greater Tokyo, 25 million people, and there we could move around. When there was a security exercise on for the President of the United States, we could still move around Tokyo with more ease than we could around the CBD in Perth. In fact, I said to someone I had to go down to the Cerulean Hotel to meet with Mr. Jin Ah-Wang who is a joint venture with the Tokyu Corporation in the development of Yanship Sun City. And they said, well, it's on the other side of the city. Allow yourself 20 minutes. I thought 20 minutes by taxi, but there we were. I was able to get in a taxi and go down to the Shibuya district of Tokyo to have that meeting in 20 minutes flat. It was just a dream. And of course, that's the famous, and the hotel is situated at the famous intersection of the Shibuya district of Tokyo, that big shopping precinct where there's a five-way intersection at the Shibuya railway station, where they just pour out tens and tens of thousands of people pouring out from underground. So that's the lesson of public transport. It doesn't matter if you've got a really good public transport minister, you will solve the congestion problems. Now, I was blown away during question time today to listen to the response of the Premier talking about the camp that Chevron want to have outside of Onslow and what an impost it would be for workers at the end of their working day to have to get in a bus and travel 45 minutes into Onslow. Let me tell you, the people of Shorehaven, the people at Yanship would be doing handstands if they were told that they only had to travel 45 minutes to work in Perth, because they can't travel from Shorehaven, they can't travel from Elkie Moss, and they certainly can't travel from Jindawi and Yanship down to Perth in 45 minutes. No way. And this is at the start and end of their working day. So the people working on the Chevron Wheatstone project in Onslow, we're told by the Premier, shouldn't have the impost of having to travel 45 minutes back to Onslow. Will relieve Chevron of the obligation of housing their people there and put it out on the camp as Chevron want. Yet the people of my electorate have to have a bigger commute because of the congestion. Now the Minister, who was, and I'm not putting him down, but he was not in this Parliament, he was doing other useful things with his life in 2008. The Minister wasn't around in 2008 when the whole Butler Railway extension schmozzle was first fumbled by the Liberal government. And let me just remind members that the Labor government built the railway line down to Mandurah within 4 years from the time of construction, and paid for it. I noticed that when we were talking about debt today, and I jibed in by way of interjection about the level of debt, the Treasurer spat back, and some of that debt was to pay for the Butler line. Well, that's true, because they'd spent all the money elsewhere on Elizabeth Quay and elsewhere. But let's just go back to the Butler line for a moment. So whilst they built the line to Mandurah, the Labor government also built the extension to the Clarkson station. In 2008, the plans were afoot and indeed underway for the Butler extension. And work had started at the Nowagup yards, the Nowagup marshalling yards, to allow for the Butler extension. What was the first move that Mr Barnett made on the assumption of office? To announce the cancellation of the Butler line, and to say that they would be doing a transport review, a rail transport review of what requirements there were for the next 20 years in Perth. Now, the community of my electorate, of course, were upset about the cancellation of the Butler line, but the government won't go, and there was a big protest in my electorate about the cancellation, but the government don't care about the community protest. What changed the government's mind before the current minister even got into this parliament was Mr Nigel Satterley, God bless his heart. Because I can remember Mr Satterley ringing me after the cancellation of the line, and I've known Mr Satterley since we first got a job together. I shouldn't say this, Madam Acting Speaker, in 1965, but his career trajectory was a little bit different to mine, although we're both find fulfilment in our own area. So I've known Mr Satterley for nearly 50 years, and he rang me up and said this is a dumb decision by the Liberal government to cancel the Butler line. And he said, what they don't realise, and what the new Treasurer and the new Premier don't realise, and you go and tell them, John, because I'll be ringing them up, and this needs to be told to this Transport Minister, is it's economic nonsense. Because it's Landcorp who own all the land up to Yanship. And I'm in joint venture with Landcorp subdividing that land. How do you think the government is going to sell their land unless there's public transport to Butler? We won't be able to sell that land. That was before Butler was built. Clarkson had been built. Merror and Ridgewood had been built. Butler was just in the process of subdivision. So I know that it was Mr Satterley who got onto the then Treasurer and said, you're denying your government income. You're denying your government income by not putting this rail through, because we're not going to be able to maximise the sales of the Butler land. And that's what turned it around. Not any idea that they're going to help the people of Butler with public transport. It was economic. And then what they did, tragically, is that how they bought it in under budget, they cancelled the station. Now, when the ministers had a quip at me saying, oh, you built the Mandurah line, but you didn't build all the stations, we're going back to build them, what they did is they cancelled the Butler station at the top of Lucan Drive, because they'd already sold that land. So blow those poor sods who'd bought this land on the basis that there was going to be a railway station there, and we'll rename the Brighton station Butler. And no one will know the difference, because no one goes up north, and Brighton, Butler, it all starts with B, and it's a long way away, and that's that. So they all talk about how we've bought this $20 million under budget because you didn't build the station. And they sold this land to the people, around Lucan Drive, what they call a TOD, a transport orientated development, where the blocks are 5 metre frontages. That's a 4 metre lounge room width and a front door, and that's it. Stacked like semi-detached in Lake Street, 40 kilometres from Perth. And these people bought these little cottage blocks on the basis it's going to be good, we're going to walk onto the station. But this government betrayed them by firstly cancelling the line. Then when Mr Satterley got on and said, hey boys, how are we going to sell the Landcorp land? Your income's going to plummet. They said, oh, we better put the $200 million train track through to maximise the sales. But we'll just get rid of the station where the people have already bought and put the station at the end of the line where we're still selling land. But the minister was up there on Sunday opening the station. Now I don't.
So you've got a transit-oriented development with a train line going straight through it, but no actual station.
No station. And all these 5 metre, and all these where you cancel the, no, see, the minister's looking quizzical because this all happened before he came. I know you're not paying attention, and it's your lack of attention that's led to the traffic congestion. That's the whole problem. You see, it's only that Mr Satterley preyed upon the government to do the Butler extension because you couldn't sell the land core without that we even got the government to swing around and build it after they'd decided to cancel the line. Now what happened? The government then had an independent review into train transport needs. And what did that come up with? That came up with 2 categories of priorities. The ones that needed doing in the first 10 years and the ones that needed doing thereafter. What was their #1 priority in terms of, if I may use the colloquial term, bang for bucks? The biggest bang for bucks you got was the $400 million extension from Butler to Yanchep. And why that was the biggest bang for bucks was twofold. Firstly, all the land between Butler and Yanchep once again is owned by Landcorp, which is being developed in concert with different developers like Lendlease, like Pete & Co, like Satterleys. Now with the announcement that line is being delayed, it's only $400 million. When I say only $400 million, that is how much the airport line has escalated since its first announcement. So we're not talking about stuff that's going to break the bank. That line will then, if built, would then return the government a massive amount of return because you can get more for the land where the rail is. But more than that, the Yanchep development is being undertaken by the Yanchep Beach joint venture, and I hope the minister's got just a moment to listen to this. The Yanchep Beach is being developed in joint venture, the Yanchep Beach joint venture, by the Tokyu Corporation and the family of Mr Jin Ah-Wang, who are in partnership. Now, we went with the Liberal members and the Speaker along to the Tokyu Corporation and saw their plans for Yanchep. And why the thoroughly independent Rail Transport Review put the Yanchep extension at the top of the pile was because of the economic benefit to the government. It is the only area where there is proposed to be a huge economic development in the metropolitan area that doesn't already exist. It's forecast that the Yanchep City will be a bigger commercial centre than Joondalup, will have more employment than Joondalup. And if that can be brought to fruition, instead of all of these people having to jam the freeway and pour down to Perth for employment, we're going to reverse the flow with people going up to Yanchep for employment. Let me tell you, I've mentioned before Tokyo. When I was there with 3 Liberal members in the presentation room of the Tokyu Corporation, they are one of the 11 railroad companies that built the underground under Tokyo. So they've got their own private part of the subway. And they explained the model, that the 50-storey building that we were then meeting in was on swampland on the edge of Tokyo, just after the war. But they put the rail in first, and then that attracts the economic activity. So the Tokyu Corporation, which have got the Tokyu University in Tokyo, have already committed to build a university in Yanchep.
Members.
He's not interested. No, Madam Acting Speaker, I don't mind. We know that the Minister for Transport is more concerned about gossiping with the other backbenchers on that side of the chamber and not show a shred of interest into the transport problems that we're facing in Butler. So the Toku Corporation are committed. No. It doesn't matter where he's sitting, he's not listening. It doesn't matter where he's sitting, he's not listening. At least the Premier's come into the chamber and can confirm that after the 2008 election, having cancelled the Butler line, and then reviewing that situation as to what benefits would come to the state by putting the Butler line in, because I was saying, Premier, as Mr Satterley had pointed out to yourself, myself and the former Treasurer, by putting the line in, you maximise the return from Landcor's land. To go up to Yanchep, you've got Landcor land all the way. You're going to maximise the return and pay for your rail. But not only that, once you get into Yanchep, the Toku Corporation are already committed to building a university, have already committed to building a hospital medical centre up there, and already committed to major retail up there and a big employment hub. They have already paid for optical cable to get into Yanchep in anticipation of all this, because the government in its report, this was not an election promise. The government's report of 2011 said the biggest bang for bucks you get out of all of the projects that we looked at was the 11-kilometre extension into Yanchep, because of the as I've harped on about, because of the economic return you get for Landcorp from the increased price of all the land they're selling and the employment you create in Yanchep. Now, without this, what's happened? We have got a single carriageway north of Butler. We've got a single carriageway for the last 11 kilometres up to Yanchep. This has become a really dangerous road. We've got exploding suburbs out there in Elkimos and Elkimos, the suburb of Trinity, Eden Beach, places you wouldn't have heard of, a lot of the members, Jindawi, Yanchep itself. And the traffic on there is a traffic jam from 7 o'clock in the morning, with people trying to file down one lane with all these suburbs feeding into one lane. Now, what's the government's response? We'll extend the freeway to Hester Avenue. Hester Avenue is about 15 kilometres from Yanchep, about 15 kilometres. What the extension of the freeway to Hester Avenue is really going to deliver is relief for the people in the electorate of Ocean Reef. Because I've lived in the northern suburbs all my life, and all my adult life, when the freeway gets to the end of its terminus, it's those suburbs that suffer, because everyone coming off the freeway has got to filter through all these people. So when it gets up to Hester Avenue, everywhere south of Hester Avenue will get relief. But in terms of travel time to Perth, no improvement at all. No improvement at all. Wanneroo Road south of Hester Avenue is single carriageway, yet the Indian Ocean Drive has opened up all the way to Geraldton, and now we get all the traffic coming down the coast road onto Wanneroo Road, and people trying to get to Perth are trying to look for an alternative to the overcrowded freeway. May I seek an extension, please, Madam Acting Speaker, or am I too early?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Go on to Wanneroo Road. There is nothing in the government's forward plan about dualling Wanneroo Road south of Hester Avenue. None. And what a dangerous road. So we've got two single carriageways, Marmion Avenue and Wanneroo Road, servicing most of my electorate heading south. And as I said at the start, the Premier is bemoaning the fact that if Chevron had to house their workforce in Onslow, they'd have a 45-minute commute. It's over an hour from up there in Yanchep during traffic. It's inhumane. Now, the only way out of this is to bite the bullet and do that last 11 kilometres of the track into Yanchep, which will deliver a huge economic benefit to the whole of the state of Western Australia. And of that $400 million that would cost to deliver the track to Yanchep, most of that would be recouped from increased land prices of Landcorp's land, which are a government agency. They will do better, as they're doing better now in Butler, as was predicted by Mr Satterley and has come to fruition. And that's on top of all the employment you'll create in Yanchep. The other thing that it will do, it will switch the traffic flow, because instead of every single house having to travel south for employment, there'll be an employment magnet to the north. There is no other way out of this. And to say that this is going to be put off until after both the, Madam Acting Speaker, I'm speaking for the Hansard, I'm not speaking to the government. They're not interested. They're all nattering about amongst themselves. They're not interested. The people of Butler are vitally interested in what I've got to say, and they'll all get the transcript, and they'll all know that during this important speech, the members on the other side, you tried to get them to pay attention. You couldn't get them to pay attention in a fit, Madam Acting Speaker. They're not interested about the problems of transport in Butler. All they'll say is...
Member for Butler, don't bring me into the debate, but keep going.
I'm sorry, I won't.
Members.
I'm sorry? Everyone in Butler enjoyed the opening of the train station. Everyone enjoyed the opening of the train station. But the problem, that's done. Now we need the line to Yanchep, because that was your... When the Premier said we're going to have an independent assessment of what's needed, the government's own independent assessment said priority one, the line into Yanchep, because of the economic benefit, both in land sales and employment. The business case run by the PTA, disclosed to me by the Yanchep Beach joint venture, demonstrated clearly that the biggest economic benefit, dollar for dollar, that you could get around the metropolitan area is completing that last 11 kilometres, because of the increased price of all the Landcorp land all the way between the Butler station and Yanchep, and the development that the Quigly Corporation, who are huge. I mean, so they own a whole railway network under Tokyo. They know what they're doing in rail, and they know what they're doing in rail and land development. And they're there for the long term. They bought it off the original owner Bond decades ago. They're there for the long term. And this is a tragedy for the northern suburbs, that what's being said is, first we'll build the airport line, then we'll build Max Light Rail, and then we'll look at Yanchep. Now Yanchep, as I said, on the costings, just saying it's double the length of the Clarkson to Butler line, so if that was 200 million, it'd be roughly 400 million. No retrofitting through suburbs, no bridges over major roads. If they put the line through now, if people want to then subdivide the land further up the track and put through Romeo Road and Piccadilly Road, well, the bridge across the railway line they're going to have to contribute to, obviously, because they're going to make the money out of it. Now's the time to put the line through to Yanchep. Now is the time for the government to say, look, we now realise the economic case. Of this $400 million, we're going to recoup a lot back through increased land sales, and we're going to increase a lot back through increased employment in the Northern Corridor. There is no employment in the Northern Corridor other than retail. So in response to the Premier's interjection, everyone was happy at the opening of the Butler railway station, no doubt. Everyone was very happy, and I'm not attacking the Premier or the Minister for Transport here. I'm trying to make a persuasive case, and it was gracious of the Premier. It was gracious of the Premier earlier this year, in response to a question, not by me, by someone else in the chamber, saying, look, there's only been one member in this Assembly that's come to me persuasively with a reasonable argument over transport, And then he said, the member for Butler. And he said, he said, can you tell the goons in the back row to put a sock in it, please, Madam Acting Speaker? The member for Wanneroo has got no interest in this at all. Since they've cancelled the line to Butler, to Yanchep, although he once lived up there, he hasn't said a boo. Now, as the Premier said graciously, I'm not taking interjections from those people, Madam Acting Speaker.
Member for Wanneroo, you're on 2 calls, so I would be quiet. Yeah.
So it was the Premier who graciously said, I thought, in answer to a question, the only person who came to me persuasively and reasonably over rail was the member for Butler, who came to me, and fair enough, we had cancelled the Butler line, but the member for Butler brought to me an economic case and persuaded me, and
Member for Corrine, I have given you and the member for Wanneroo ample notice by my looks towards you. I shall call you both.
And so it was, as I said, it was the Premier who said graciously that the member for Butler had come to me with a persuasive case as to why that 7 kilometres should be built. And what I came to him about was an economic argument. And I can remember it in the members' bar with the former Treasurer, Mr Buswell. And we said, look, as Nigel Satterley will tell you, Landcorp owns all that land. You'll get your money back by doing the 7 kilometre extension, by being able to sell more land at a better price. Well, Mr Premier and Mr Transport Minister, I repeat that same argument again to you now, that completing the 11 kilometres into Yanchep now will deliver a big economic benefit to the state of Western Australia. It will really increase the dividend of Landcorp and pour that money back into the Treasury coffers. It will provide for the first time an economic centre in the north, other than retail, to employ people in that area. And we've got another problem out there, where it's some 50 kilometres from Perth, some of that land to the north, and as the member for Ocean Reef can confirm, there is little social life for the young people out there. There is little in these suburbs like in Alkimos, like in Shorehaven, the young people haven't got theatres to go to. They haven't got sporting grounds to go to. They need public transport to get out of there, because they become trapped in these suburbs on the weekend and then start riding unlicensed motorcycles through all the sandhills up there and engaging, regrettably, filling their time in, regrettably, with other antisocial behaviour. So the benefit of putting the Yanchep line through to the line through to Yanchep, this last 11 kilometres, is economic return to the state of Western Australia by getting out more, by seeing a bigger dividend to Landcorp, who will be the biggest beneficiaries, because they own all of that land up to Yanchep, will be the biggest beneficiaries of the extension of the line, and bring all that money back into the state coffers, so the $400 million will be partially recouped. You've got a massive congestion problem up there, as I said, with only 2 single-lane roads out of those suburbs, a single lane down Wanneroo Road or the single lane Marmion Avenue, which the congestion is just unbelievable and is way, way more in excess of the 45-minute commute that the Premier was saying was an unbearable burden for the Chevron workers. And then thirdly is the social aspect, that you need public transport up there so that the young people can get further down to the south, where there's movie theatres and different things to engage them, to be able to get down to the new football stadium, to come down to the metropolitan area. But for young people in Shorehaven, Jindawi, there's on the weekend there's hardly any public transport out of there. And so this line into Yanchep now is absolutely crucial. And when you think that that area of Perth is the fastest growing area of Perth, it speaks for itself. Now they're going to spend over $2 billion to build 7 kilometres of track out to the airport, which is already very well serviced by the most incredible road network around the airport. And I'm not saying stop the airport line, but you've bumped Yanchep by the Independent Review's own report from the most economic beneficial rail project in the metropolitan area. You've bumped that right down to the bottom, and without any consultation with anyone, and taken the airport and put that at the top, and then Max Rail behind it, and then Yanchep, you can wait until 2030, until all these other projects are finished. What are we going to do in the north? You know, there'll be long distance swimming races to try and find another way to swim down or something. You know, it'll be faster than the freeway, and it doesn't matter if they extend it to Hester Avenue, which they will, and we'll all be there to cheer when it gets there. It won't shorten the time because there's going to be even more cars on that freeway by the time that gets through.
Remember for Kwinana.